Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, June 17th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Astra Taylor, writer, documentarian, co-founder of the Debt Collective, and Leah Hunt-Hendrix, co-founder of The Way to Win and the philanthropy network Solidaire. Authors of Solidarity, the past, present, and future of a world-changing idea. Also on the program today, Netanyahu disbands his war cabinet after last week's dual exit. Netanyahu also claims no pause in the Rafah assault, which the U.S. says isn't happening anyways. AP documents how Israel's assault on Gaza has eliminated tens of entire extended Palestinian families. Hundreds of members of families. U.S. executive pay raises at the fastest rate in 14 years. Polls show Trump convictions hurting him with independents. Republicans pass a culture war-laden $895 billion defense bill, with 199 Democrats voting against. They'll all vote for it as soon as it's just about spending money to kill other people and not about silly culture war things. Maryland governor pardons 178,000 marijuana convictions. And Bowman's campaign is now facing 7 times more in outside expenditures in what is shaping up to be a $20 million primary of just outside expenditures.
Unreal.
Surgeon General calls on Congress to label social media dangers for teens, or dangerous, I should say, for teens. Can confirm. Alex Jones must liquidate his personal assets, but is allowed to maintain InfoWars, ostensibly to pay off the Sandy Hook families. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the beginning of the week.
Yes, it is.
What would you call that, Emma Vigeland?
Monday Fun Day.
That's right. Monday Fun Day. That's what we call it around here. Just to give you a sense of where we're at, we are 10 days away from the first debate. We will be covering that live. We will have to be doing a little bit of some fancy footwork because sometimes the specific company that is carrying this debate gets a little proprietary, despite the fact that a presidential debate should be fair use.
Yes.
In my estimation, regardless.
If anything.
And secondly, as opposed to just being open sourced. The idea that it's
We're
not
trying
so
to
shocking
squeeze every
these days.
penny out of this.
But I mean, the idea that a corporation could own the one of two debates is pretty disturbing and indicative of everything else with our political system. But I will also add that we will have running commentary, which is known as adding value and changing the underlying product and creating a wholly distinct derivative. Because I can assure you, there is nowhere else in the world you will find Emma Vigeland and Sam Seder talking over and Matt and Bradley too.
It's unique.
Talking over them. That will not happen anywhere else.
And potentially with the help of some beverages.
That's right.
That's
and
what
we'll
adds
also,
to the unique nature of the product that we're putting out there.
Yes.
So.
I mean, there's probably a lot of commentators who will be drunk while they comment on this, but they won't be us.
Exactly.
We will be us drunk as commentators over this.
We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
Speaking of the trail, the campaign is cranking up. Donald Trump is out there. He's made his triumphant return to Congress, where all of the Congress people who were literally pooping their pants on January 6th, the Republicans who were guys like Josh Hawley running through the place, Republican lawmakers who were lying on the floor, hiding under the pews of Congress, calling and saying goodbye to their families, welcomed Donald Trump back as if not only none of that happened, but that he had no part in it. And so now he's on the campaign trail. He's at Turning Points Action. Don't know if he followed the woman basically chastising all of these supposed college students for thinking about having sex, or if he, came after, or before someone who was looking out at the completely white audience, probably significantly male-dominated, and saying, we got to get done with these identity politics. But here is Donald Trump delivering his remarks to Turning Points Action in Michigan.
The numbers are crazy. The food numbers, the energy numbers. Yet Joe Biden has
pause
no
it for
plan.
1 second. We should just say gas numbers are actually really down. The cost of gas, relatively speaking. And even food prices are dropping now.
Even the food numbers?
Even the food numbers. Yeah.
Again, it really is him.
So many Big Macs.
It's like Lucille Bluth not knowing the price of a banana, thinking it costs $10. Oh, the food numbers. Yes. As if he doesn't get all his food wholesale by one of his many workers. But anyway.
Numbers, the energy numbers. Yet Joe Biden has no plan. He's got absolutely no plan. He doesn't even know what the word inflation means. I don't think if you gave him a quiz, I think he should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas?
Pause it for 1 second. Now, there may be some confusion that the audience has about Doc Ronnie Johnson, because he's referring to the former White House physician, and so that's the Doc part. Mm-hmm. The Ronnie is his first name.
Correct.
And Johnson is a made-up name, not the name of Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who is... and so I just wanted to put that in, that here he is... arguing that Joe Biden needs to take a cognitive test because he doesn't even know what the word inflation means, and he is trumpeting proof that he took a cognitive test from a doctor. He's just getting the doctor's name wrong. But it happens.
Poetic.
And I aced it. Doc Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas?
What?
He was the White House doctor. And he said I was the healthiest president he feels in history. So I liked him very much immediately. In fact, he said if I didn't eat junk food, I would live to 200. That's
Hold on, pause
said.
it. Something immediately? What? He needs immediately? Good
I was the healthiest president he feels in history, so I liked him very much immediately. In fact, he said if I didn't eat junk food, I would live to 200. That's what he said. But I said, Ronnie, should I take a test? He said, well, you know, it's Walter Reed. It's sort of a public hospital. If you don't do well, they're going to find out about it. I said, well, you know, like I'm a smart person. How tough is it? He said, it gets very tough as you get to the middle of it. And I did something that he's never seen done. I aced it. I got every question right.
Okay, now, it's quite possible that some of this is true. But the interesting thing about taking Dr. Ronnie Johnson's word for this, who is now a member of Congress, and in fact, his fellow Congresspeople are pretty pissed that he is on the Intel committee. And one of the reasons why they're pissed that he's on the Intel committee is because they're a little bit concerned about his history at the White House. One of the elements of his history at the White House was that he was running a pill mill.
Yeah.
Ronnie Jackson, that's his real name, or maybe that was the name.
I almost forgot now. That seems wrong.
Yeah. Under fire over White House prescriptions. He was handing out all sorts of pills. And this is, I should say, this is Inspector General of the Department of Defense. The report was a result of a multi-year investigation after the Defense Department received complaints in 2018 concerning unnamed senior military medical officer engaging in, quote, improper medical practices, and found the unit's pharmacy operations had severe and systemic problems. He was running a pill mill in the White House. Now, to be fair, he was also a recipient. He wasn't just the doctor. He was a client, too. Ronnie Jackson, this is from CNN, made sexual comments, drank alcohol, and took Ambien while working as the White House physician.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say, like, it's one thing to take Ambien when you're going to sleep, but it's another thing to be popping these things while you're handing out pills to everybody else.
Hey, you relaxed enough to give me a cognitive test, Ronnie?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You're gonna live. You're gonna live to 200. You're gonna live to 200.
I have never seen anybody do this on a cognitive test, man.
Yeah.
You're crushing it, bro. Now crush this beer.
Yeah, it's physician, not priest, okay?
Speaking of crushing, this stuff is much better when you snort
crush
it. Totally.
Yeah.
I like this guy immediately when I got into the White House. Immediately.
Right. I do like the admission there where he said that he complimented me, and so I liked him very much. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much how it works with you.
I'm smart.
He said I was the healthiest president in history.
There you go.
That does sound like a drunk guy. It's like, you're the hottest woman alive.
Yeah.
You're the healthiest president in history.
We should open a bar.
Let's do it, man.
We should also say that he took that cognitive test like 6-7 years ago.
Right.
Yesterday. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Astra Taylor and Leah Hunt-Hendrix, authors of Solidarity, the Past, Present, and Future of a World-Changing Idea. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. What's the best way to learn a language? I think everybody knows this. Immersion. You got to live where the language is spoken and use it every day. However, for many of us, we can't afford to do that because we don't have the time, because of our damn kid, because of our kids, or you don't have the cash to go move to a foreign country for a couple of days, or I should say a couple months. However, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Me gusta aprender español porque quiero hablar español.
Wow.
Now, I can't come up with anything more interesting to say off the top of my head, but it's fun.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm getting I'm getting some fluidity. It's just, it is
fluency.
I just don't know anybody else who speaks Spanish around me. So And then it would mean I would have to talk to people, outside of the 6 people I talked to over the course of a week. And but the point is, you can be a better you in 2024 with Babbel. It is a science-backed language learning app that actually works. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors. You don't have to waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel has quick 10-minute lessons that are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. 10-minute sessions. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. If you get on, the walkie thing? What do people do at the gym? I don't know.
Oh, the treadmill?
Yeah, the treadmill. You can, I just don't go, I haven't been to a gym in so long. You get on there and you're doing probably 30 minutes on the treadmill. You could listen to 3 different lessons.
Definitely.
Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, and rooted in real-life situations and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you learned in the real world. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove that Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester of college. And I am trying to sell that idea to my daughter to see if we can, but you don't get the credit, so you can't, but
right. But
this is, but it's a great way to learn a language. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. And here's a special, it's limited time, deal for our listeners right now. Get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/majority. You will get up the 60% off at babbel.com/majority, spelled BABBEL.com/majority. Rules and restrictions may apply. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube subscriptions as well as at majority.fm. Also, today's program sponsored by basically what is a living air filter. Indoor air pollution, I'm sure people have read about this, can be up to 5 times higher indoors compared to outdoors. I mean, during COVID, I think you realize this, like when, the big issue that I had in here was trying to get the CO2 levels to what they were when you're outside. This is more space outside. And that's why we now have NeoPX. It's a bioengineered air purifier, 100% nature-based, designed by PhD scientists. And what am I talking about? It's a plant. But it's a special plant. NeoPX tackles harmful air pollutants known as VOCs. I think you're probably aware of those. That's the smelly stuff in paint, although there's less so in paint. It's volatile organic compounds. But your furniture that you bought, the cleaning products, sometimes cooking ware, it all off-gasses this stuff. And the science is in a pollutant-eating bacteria that lives with the plant. And then here's how it works. You mix the Power Drops formula with water and add it to your plant every month to activate the air purification. It's an already sort of a plant known to purify air. All plants do, but some do it much more efficiently. And this just basically gives it almost superpowers. NeoPX purifies the air as well as 30 regular household plants. It is an air purifier that is powered by nature. It is, of course, electricity free. It is a self-watering planter as well, made from biodegradable materials. Do we have a picture of that, Bradley? Let's put that up. With NeoPX, the air feels fresher. 87% of their customers feel the difference in a week after setting it up. When you purchase NeoPX, you're going to receive 6 Power Drop pouches. Celebrate the launch. NeoPlant's offering the 7th pouch free of charge. That's 1 extra month of pure air. Go to neoplants.com/majority. The code will be applied automatically at checkout. Comes all in cardboard recyclable shipping container. They do a great job. And it's like one of those like pothos plants. Is that what they call them? But it's got these special. It's been bred to have even more air filtering abilities. Shipping available in the U.S. and worldwide. Shipping is coming soon. Again, podcast description and YouTube for the link. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Astra Taylor and Leah Hunt-Hendrix, authors of Solidarity, the Past, Present, and Future of a World-Changing Idea. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the show Astra Taylor, writer, documentarian, co-founder of the Debt Collective, and Leah Hunt-Hendrix, co-founder of Way to Win and the philanthropy network Solidaire, authors of Solidarity, the Past, Present, and Future of a World-Changing Idea. Thanks to you both for joining us. Astra, we've spoken to you many, many times in the context of debt, broadly speaking, particularly student debt. Start with why a book about solidarity?
Solidarity is so important. I mean, this is, I think, what y'all are often talking about on this show. It's what every organizer is trying to build. It's a sense of group cohesion, the sense that our fates are interlinked. I mean, it's the majority in Majority Report. We're trying to build that majority, help it come into being. And so this book is really the fruit of, our collaboration, Leah and my collaboration, and really the product of our time in the trenches. We met at Occupy Wall Street. I went on to help found the Debt Collective. As you mentioned, I've been on the show many times, which is a union of debtors that's been fighting for economic justice. Leah organizes with donors, trying to move donors to support radical change. And what we have to do over and over again is build relationships, try to build solidarity. One of our main points is solidarity doesn't just exist. You really have to nurture it and cultivate it. And it just doesn't get the attention that it deserves. We think that solidarity is as important to democracy as freedom, as equality, as justice. But it's been kind of left out of the pantheon of important concepts. We think it needs to be put right back in there, and that solidarity is actually kind of a precondition of democracy. We're actually not going to be able to build the majority we need, the multiracial, multi-generational, multi-geographic majority we need. We're not going to be able to change the political system if we don't start taking solidarity really seriously.
Leah, let me ask you, I mean, as you both were down at Zuccotti Park, and in fact, this show, we were down there, I think the first live broadcast we may have done, or we had a contraption that we were walking around with at the time. But what I'm curious, out of that experience, what led you into, and you write about, you come from a very wealthy family, and the idea that like when you came out of that experience, how did that impact your trajectory to where we get to this notion of realizing like there's a solidarity deficit or debt we can talk about as well?
Yeah. Well, I had always been interested in and deeply troubled by wealth inequality. Partly from recognizing just the fact that it doesn't work for anyone. Even the people in the 1% are struggling with isolation, fear, status anxiety, how to protect their wealth, how to get to the higher echelons of the 0.1%. So we just live in this society of like real scarcity mentality and competition. And so I was always interested in how we kind of upend the severe wealth inequality that we have. So I was working on my dissertation, my doctorate, when Occupy started, and I was already writing about social movements when I went down to Occupy, but that was the real catalyst for me to actually get involved. And one of the things that really stood out to me during Occupy was the construction of the identity of the 99% as a grouping versus the 1%, which when you think about it, that's like the biggest kind of, it's a very open, welcome, like 99% of us have a lot in common. And we just have to challenge the 1% that's kind of dividing us and keeping us apart and profiting off of that. And even as someone in the 1%, I feel like you can be in solidarity with that, with the mission of equality and justice for everyone. And so, yeah, we just realized that there wasn't, like, this book should have already existed. There was nowhere to go to really think about, like, people would throw around the concept of solidarity, sign their emails with it, but there wasn't really deep discussion of what does it actually mean? How do you actually build it? And it's really hard and it's complicated. And that's why we ended up with a very dense book. But we hope we start to do it justice, and that others will continue to help thinking about it and kind of building on the project.
And I should say, I mean, the book outlines moments in history of examples, almost like case studies, if you will, of solidarity and how it builds and whatnot. And so, Astra, let's start with that concept of solidarity debt before we go into the different types of solidarity. What is solidarity debt?
This is how Leah convinced me to write this book with her. And we were talking on the phone, strategizing, scheming, as we often do. And she said, Astra, I've been meaning to tell you that in my, research, writing this dissertation of the sort of history of this idea, I found out that the word solidarity and the original concept, as it was sort of brought into Western political thought and the sort of history that brought it to us today. In the beginning, it was actually a concept in ancient Roman law, and it meant a debt held in common. Obligato in solidum. So a debt held in common. So picture multiple farmers on the hook together. And so if someone's sinking, people have to step up and bail each other out. And so, of course, I'm interested in debt. So that kind of caught my imagination. But what it also did was it showed right there that solidarity is a material concept. It's not just a warm, fuzzy feeling or an affect, like I got you, or I feel your pain, empathy, pity. Solidarity is material. And that idea that we're all actually indebted, we're all on the hook together, then actually was incorporated into political thought. In France, we trace this lineage, and theorists during the Industrial Revolution started to think about what would hold society together in this period of tumult, right? Again, capitalism is coming into being, modern democracy as we know it. And people were asking, well, what's going to hold society together? And people started theorizing about solidarity. And solidarity, of course, became a kind of rallying cry of the labor movement. But we really pick up on this idea that solidarity is about our interdependence. It's a relational concept. Solidarity is bonds between people. And this idea that we're all indebted, in France in the early 1900s actually becomes one of the bases of the French welfare state. This idea that we have to sort of, pay our debts forward by investing in social provision that helps care for future generations and people who have less privilege. So there's this rich intellectual history that was news to me, right? Again, because it's just a word we throw around, and then it's also a practice. It's also a practice, and that's why we have those stories of history that you mentioned, the stories from the past of movements that actually built new identities, found effective strategies, and really moved the needle, against really tough odds.
And Leah, that's one of the things that you guys write about, that concept, which you touched on to a certain extent in terms of like wealth inequality being bad also for the 1%. But this idea of there being a material basis to solidarity, and that those engaging with it, in that dynamic of solidarity, all have a material reason to do so. Will you expand on that? The idea that it's not about empathy necessarily, although, that helps, but it's also about self-interest that is that creates that solidarity.
Yeah, we think it's important to have a sense of how we are all really literally in this together and bound together, and so there is a self-interest in making sure that everyone is surviving and doing okay. And so we talk about the semblances of solidarity, like empathy, charity, benevolence, altruism. There was a movement recently in philanthropy called effective altruism, which has motivated a lot of people, especially in Silicon Valley. Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the kind of leading figures, or most infamous. And the idea of altruism, it asks you to kind of do for others, but it's still really about your own moral purity, and it's a little bit out of touch with the material ways that we're all interconnected. So even as I work with philanthropists and donors, I think it's important for them to see that they would benefit from a stronger labor movement. They benefit. White people benefit from racial justice policies. We all benefit from a world that has more public goods, more safe. It's safer for everyone, and so acting from that place of actually enlightened self-interest leads to actually potentially better outcomes.
Astra, how do you take that? I mean, so, and I get the idea that it's not, this isn't just about me feeling good or being able to, go to a party and say, look what I've done for people, and that type of sort of self-interest.
That's philanthropy.
But, well, I mean, and we'll get into that
get into
because
that,
this is there's stuff that I had no idea about, these philanthropy funds that go back and forth is sort of fascinating to me. But we're going to get there. But how, from a philosophical standpoint, Astra, do you delineate between the idea that solidarity is in that the true solidarity is in the best material interest of everyone engaging in that dynamic, versus the sort of libertarian notion of if everybody acts in their own self-interest, we get the best outcomes from society. What's the difference there, right? How do you where is it that the group's interest align in a way that acting in your own self-interest doesn't?
Yeah, as the granddaughter of an avid Irandian libertarian, I'll say that the self-interest that many libertarians espouse is purely economic, right? The idea is that if you pursue your material self-interest in terms of capitalists thriving and success, so trying to make money, trying to advance yourself in the terms set by the market, then that will magically lift all boats, that will create the most wealth. So, our sense of the kind of self-interest we're advocating for is much more expansive, right? As Leah was saying, white supremacy is not good for white people. And there are sort of economic arguments to be made for that, right? When we eviscerate public goods, a whole lot of white people also suffer from the lack of those. When we fail to, engage in, climate forward policies, we all suffer as a result of that. So I think we are arguing for a much more expansive conception of self-interest, and it's something that I think this insight really does come from our time, again, as organizers, organizing with the group to hang together is by saying, there's something in it for you, right? And at the Debt Collective, we're fighting both for the cancellation of people's individual debts, but people also fight for each other. And there's also a benefit of, there's that benefit of feeling that you have camaraderie, that you're in community, that you have agency. And so self-interest to us, I think is, it's a much more expansive thing. It's not just what's in your bank account. And it's not a competitive zero-sum version of self-interest.
Right. That zero sum seems to me to be the fundamental difference, right? Because it's not exclusively in your self-interest, because within the context of our system, exclusively in your self-interest would necessarily mean that it is not in the best interest of at least a significant portion of people around you, right? I mean, you can't become that rich. Everybody can't become that rich, because it's about a dynamic that is going on where you have that wealth inequality, that's the definition of rich. If we all have $1 billion, then you're not necessarily working in your self-interest if you want to be able to get something that somebody else can't. You're not going to be able to buy your first sink or whatever it is that we want to get at any given point.
Elon Musk would probably disagree with us, right? But we our position is like, it would be better for him. Like, he'd be a healthier man if he wasn't a billionaire. But so we don't think that we can persuade everybody to come to this more enlightened perspective. We understand that there's a fight, which is why there's a lot of emphasis on building power and strategy in this book. But nevertheless, we do think that the zero-sum game really isn't good for anybody.
Leah, delineate for us the difference between transformative and reactionary solidarity.
Yeah, sure. Well, solidarity in general is not always good. Solidarity is sort of a neutral concept that just means like group cohesion, how groups come together and create a shared identity. And so this can go in a lot of different directions. So we wanted to really distinguish sort of the positive and the negative formulations of this. So we call reactionary solidarity is when a group comes together sort of based on a strict division between us and them, they are to be annihilated. They are a threat to our existence. And it is back to this kind of zero-sum mentality. So, and white supremacy, patriarchy, even nationalism, we see a lot of instances of, and ruling class solidarity which is very strong. These are all examples of reactionary solidarity. Transformative solidarity is when you try to build bridges across divides. It's less about sort of given identities, though we actually don't think any identity is really given, but sort of prefabricated identities to build bigger collectivities that are more diverse and more inclusive. And it's structurally different from reactionary solidarity because the line between us and there still is a them, but the line between the us and them is malleable, it's porous. The them is not to be annihilated, but is potentially to be transformed. So the ends of transformative solidarity are like more inclusion, and we like actually hope that the them, the they, whoever we're polarized against, actually benefit from the changes that we're trying to pursue. So again, like we want Elon Musk to be happy, and we think that a world where with high taxation and a more equal wealth distribution would actually help that. So we're not trying. So transformative solidarity doesn't try to annihilate its other, but it does still involve polarization.
Astra, let's go into. I should also just say, like, conceptually, I get it. I don't care about Elon Musk, but conceptually, I get that. But so Saul Alinsky, you quote Saul Alinsky in the book, saying something to the effect of like, "Friends aren't permanent, neither are our enemies." In practice, like that idea that expansive solidarity, or I should say transformative solidarity, is expansive. how do you make those? I mean, I understand the difference too in terms of like the them in that instance. We're not looking for them to suffer. We believe that for them, it's also going to be better. Now, you can clearly see the distinction between white supremacy and a notion of like, an all inclusive type of a notion of like when the solution arrives, right? Like white supremacy, the end game is to have whites supreme and others sort of suffer on some level. In the opposite, even if those white supremacists aren't part of the coalition, the solution benefits them because we're living in a more just society, and we're able to sort of get more like universal services, for instance, because race, just in this instance, is not used as a cudgel. How do you, each time that it's divided 99% in them or whatever it is, how are those lines drawn? And particularly in a situation where it's like, we're not talking about 99% of the people, for instance, like trans rights, right? Like we're actually talking about, I don't know, I mean, 1%, 2%, the rights of those people. How do you delineate where the us and them is in those instances with the understanding that at different times it's fluid?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question and something that we try to answer in the book over the course of 400 pages. But I think one thing we're very attentive to is the way that the right wing uses reactionary solidarity to divide and conquer, right? And so that is, a sort of key part of the book. Solidarity for us is not spontaneous, whether it's reactionary or transformative. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources. And a whole lot of resources have been put into, as you said, using race as a cudgel, taking real issues like trans people's lives and using it as a wedge. I mean, we're seeing this right now, I think, around the movement for Palestine, and, is using this as a wedge issue to divide liberals, divide the left. And so, the Sal Alinsky quote, "No permanent friends, no permanent enemies." This is the idea why we settled on the word transformative. It's the idea that people and systems can change. Nothing is set in stone. The identities we use today, those have been formed over generations. The political system is an invention of human beings. These things can be changed. Now, to do that work, we have to be really strategic. And I do think there's always going to be polarization, but we do have to be careful because as we choose our enemies, we remake ourselves. So it's a high stakes process. I mean, I'll say just, in the debt collective, for example, we're fighting for the abolition of unjust debts, and for the provision of free public college, universal healthcare, so that people do not have to take on life-destroying debts to survive. So our target is the economic system that allows people a class of people to profit from poverty. So, we are polarized against creditors and privatizers and profiteers. So when if we manage to change the system, right, and let's say we win universal healthcare so people don't have to take on medical debt, well, those people then can't occupy that position in the economy, right? And so that frame allows us to then unite people who might otherwise be divided, right? To unite debtors across race, across geography, across age, against this structural enemy, against their shared oppression. And so I think each move, we go through the history of different movements, and this is, what movements have to do. This is why we say there does have to be some polarization. There does have to be an us and a them, but we want it to be one that has the capacity to, build a majority, bring people into a new kind of community, to bridge across identity divides, and hopefully find a strategic lever so they can actually change things and make their lives better, and set the next generation up for a more interesting fight.
And the idea is that everybody theoretically shares in the spoils, that being not necessarily, cash, but a better society, one that is going to be more functioning for everybody. Leah, speaking of spoils, let's talk about the philanthropy thing. I had mentioned to you guys beforehand, I was excited to see Emil Durkheim, somebody I hadn't thought about in many, many years. I have thought a lot about that Rand Corporation report on the Gates Foundation or the Gates Initiative in education. We used to do a lot more with education, talking about the corporate reform stuff, in the past on this program. And it was a story that really got no play. But just to sum it up, the about 15 years after or 10 years after Gates at the least sunk about $1 billion into our education system with an experiment, which fundamentally altered the trajectory of education in this country for, I would argue, at least a decade or two in terms of like where it continues, and value added on testing and whatnot. The Rand Corporation did an assessment that the Gates people hired and said, yeah, no, didn't work. You should listen to teachers next time, essentially, which is what the teachers in the education have been saying. Got very little play, but it showed the real danger in having people have that kind of wealth where it's like, I have an idea about this. I think I'm going to do it. And I don't have to include the people I didn't want to include in there. But this world of philanthropy, talk about that to a certain extent. And also tell us, is it the DAFs, the funds, DAFs?
Donor-advised funds, yeah.
I had no idea about this. It's just a full-on scam, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to remember that this whole system we live in of philanthropy, nonprofits, political organizations, all of this is constructed by policy and tax law, basically. And so early in the 1900s, Rockefeller and other kind of millionaires, billionaires wanted to create a system that would house their wealth and protect it from taxation. And to do that, they would have to give away a small portion of it. So in general, foundations have to give away 5% of their corpus a year. And actually, many don't even do that. And the rest can sit in the stock market and be invested and grow. And so it really, the whole structure is a tax shelter, and that really benefits the wealthy. And then meanwhile, the money that they are giving to nonprofits is not used Democrat. It's they get to decide where that goes. In general, the majority actually goes to religious institutions and maybe the arts and hospitals, private institutions. Very little gets spent on social justice or climate and other kind of progressive causes. But even the money that does is then spent in ways where the donor has kind of undue power over the strategies and tactics that organizations use. So there are many examples of what scholar Megan Francis Ming calls movement capture, where a foundation might redirect. She writes about how the Garland Fund, which was a progressive foundation in the mid 1900s, kind of redirected the NAACP away from working on violence against Black people towards working on education, and just how that shifted the whole racial justice movement at the time. And so it's just a really problematic structure. It's one thing, and yeah, DAFs are even worse. Foundations at least have to disclose what they give to. They're supposed to show that they're giving away 5% a year. DAFs don't even need to do that. So it's kind of all dark money.
But explain that dynamic about the DAFs where they can actually contribute to each other and it being considered a contribution to charity. But in fact, these are just, as far as I can tell, stock portfolios that you're giving to a charity, and this charity's job is to build more money. And that's what we do with the money that we get. And it almost sounds like it's just traded back and forth. What happens with those profits? Like, do they go back into the fund or can they be redistributed back to the donors?
No, I think that in general, they do stay in the fund, but it doesn't really matter that much because the donors still can
do the donors get tax tax credit for the increase in the value of those funds?
They're not taxed on the increased value of those funds. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, do they get a tax benefit? Like, is it a right? Like, if I put 500 grand into a fund, one of these DAFs, and it turns into 10 years later $1 million, can I write off that? Can I write off that extra $500,000?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a tax benefit machine that they've built. That's it. It's just a way of getting tax breaks.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, tax law is really important and it's really wonky and not a lot of people pay attention to it. There are groups like Patriotic Millionaires is a project out of DC that tries to organize millionaires to work on higher taxation, on progressive taxation. They lobby Congress, but not a lot of people work on it. You know, like besides that group, almost nobody is working for, no wealthy person is funding work on progressive taxation. And this is going to be a really big issue in the next election cycle because the Trump tax cuts are going to expire. And it's really important to be, even if Biden wins, it's going to be important to be ready to fight to increase taxation on the wealthy.
Astra, let's talk a little bit about the idea of a solidarity state and sort of the challenges that we're facing at this moment to both, well, let's talk about the solidarity state. And then I want to talk about just sort of like assessing where we are on the left, because I think you outlined three sort of challenges that face us now. One, sort of the late stage capitalism, the neoliberalism, and Trump, just in terms of the authoritarianism, and it's going on around the world, but also the left, to the extent that we have one in this country, is about as fractured and on its I think so, like, heels in a way that it really hasn't been since this era of like post-Occupy.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so to begin with the solidarity state. I mean,
that was a big question.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I really felt it. So we talk about solidarity at multiple levels. So one, solidarity is something that you build in your interpersonal relationships, right? I mean, you can act in solidarity with movements on your own to a degree. We also talk about it at the level of, institutions like unions and be they labor unions, tenant unions, debtors unions, other community groups. But we also think solidarity is something that can be implemented at the level of policy. So in this sense, solidarity is a means and an end. So it is the means by which ordinary people build power together, but it's also the end goal. We want to create a more solidaristic society. As a backdrop to this, so that it sounds less, utopian, I think it's important to recognize how anti-solidarity policies are built into the law as it currently exists, right? Like, we live in a society, capitalism is very anti-solidarity. It encourages competition, the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few. It creates, a culture of zero-sum kind of scarcity. And of course, the tax regime that we're talking about, right, is one that doesn't exactly foster solidarity. But you can also see it, very much in labor law. For example, in the United States, we have very regressive labor laws. Solidarity, or what are sometimes called sympathy strikes, are illegal, which means that if there is a strike at Amazon, for example, UPS workers or FedEx workers or postal workers cannot strike in solidarity as they can in other countries. And we're seeing the criminalization of protests right now. This is part of why it's a tough moment for the left, right? We're seeing the criminalization of protests on campus, but also over the last few years, we've seen a lot of laws that are anti-solidarity passed. So, for example, laws targeting abortion providers, or making it illegal, or offering bounties for people who help others get reproductive health care. We're, in Georgia, in response to the Stop Cop City movement, is now illegal for people to bail out more than 3 folks a year. So that is targeting, bail funds, which are a key form of solidarity. Many states have passed very harsh measures saying, it's a felony to block a sidewalk or an intersection, or maybe it's actually legal, or you are protected if you ram your car into protesters. So law can be used in different ways. It can be used to attack solidarity, or we are saying to foster solidarity. And so a solidarity state is something, we consider it sort of the next step beyond the welfare state. And a solidarity state would not just aim to redistribute wealth. Well, that's really important, right? It's important to have social policies that are more egalitarian, a more progressive tax code, for example, better social services. But a solidarity state would recognize that we also need to be attentive to relationships to help people feel themselves as and understand themselves as interdependent citizens. So I'll just give an example and wrap up. The way the welfare state works today, what we have of one, is that wealthy, affluent people get all these invisible benefits, like the tax code we're talking about. Yeah, put your money in a DAF, write things off. Or, in a more sort of banal example is you get a mortgage, you get your mortgage interest deduction. That's a huge subsidy to mostly affluent people. And people don't think of that as welfare. They just get these benefits. If you are working class, you're poor, you're lower, and you seek benefits from the state, they're stigmatized. There's all sorts of bureaucracy. You're made to feel awful about yourself. And both of those extremes undermine solidarity. One part of the population is stigmatized, made to feel like they're takers. The other side just sees themselves as makers. They get all these invisible benefits, but they don't have to see that they're actually interdependent, right? A solidarity state would bring all of this, equalize that, bring into the open, and be like, actually, we're all products of society. We all benefit from these social programs, and so we are envisioning, a range of policies that would, again, be progressive in an economic sense, but also really try to create what we call solidaristic feedback loops that help us see ourselves as having stakes, as benefiting from public goods. And we think that would go a long way in terms of creating a different kind of consciousness that would make it harder to roll back progressive gains.
Yeah, and I think you cite Susan Mettler and her Submerged State, I guess her book actually, and so the idea is to make the state, the role of the state, less submerged, and both in practice and in perception. As to where we are. I mean, you mentioned also, the student protests, and one of the ways that solidarity was undercut, and Reagan had this idea, in addition to wanting to, provide tax cuts to people, but also saw the benefit of, if we raise tuition on University of California students, the stakes of their protest become a little bit more, a little higher, and like, you're wasting all this money. You're not, talk a little bit, Leah, about that sort of dynamic that exists. I mean, particularly in the context of what we've just seen, but I know also you guys write that student protests are super important, but they only have so much power because they're students, as opposed to economic power in their working. But talk about both those dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, when you think back over the past decades, students have always been at the forefront of peace movements and the climate movement, so many important movements. And it's been interesting how their tactics have evolved from demonstrations to more recently encampments, divestment strategies. They've evolved, I think, as the left has evolved, and even electoral strategies. Many students were involved in the uncommitted movement during the Democratic primaries. And so I think all of this is really important. But as the example you cited, Reagan said, if it becomes too costly to go to school, the more expensive the more it costs to go to school, the less, and the more debt that you're incurring, the the harder it is to take that time to protest and express your civil liberties. And so there was a direct correlation between the increase in tuition costs and student debt and the clampdown on the anti-war protests during that period. And so, yeah, I mean, and we've seen, it's just been the backlash or the clampdown on students over the past months has just been incredible. But I think it's also been really inspiring that young people continue to see the interconnection between issues around war and peace, military budgets, climate justice, racial justice, and that they're, putting their lives on the line and incurring really significant costs for doing that. And I think we think that we should all be supporting them as much as possible.
Astra, lastly, let's just focus in just a little bit more on the sort of like what we're seeing in the left at the moment, and even also considering the sort of like an expansive view on that from center to the left, because it feels like we're back into an era where we were 20 years ago, where there was sort of like centrists really making their bones complaining about the left's tactics or their shrillness or whatnot, in part because there has been in the left, I think since Sanders' campaign ended in 2020, a sort of lack of focus maybe, or in some respects, or a less of a singularity in terms of, it's not 99% versus one. It's maybe a bunch of different other things, although obviously that those concepts still exist. And in part, because there was some, policy victories, or at least a nod towards them from the Biden administration, more than I think a lot of people thought would be. Like, where are we on that in that area, and how do we get out of it and move into the next sort of era of a more cohesive left in this country?
It's a big question. I mean, this is something we think about all the time. Yeah, I mean, it's something we think about and wrestle with all the time. I mean, I think we wrote this book because actually we really think solidarity is the key. I think the left would be on stronger footing if we had a strong recognition of the importance of solidarity as the way by which we build a bigger movement, so that we have power to win more. And that means, building coalitions, working with people who aren't 100% on the same page as you, but always trying to bring more people in the door. I mean, it is a tough moment where we are in a moment of backlash, which is a word I don't really love, because the backlash in the United States is kind of eternal, right? I mean, wherever, there have been movements for multiracial democratic gains, right? There has been pushback, sometimes ferocious, right? If you go back to, the violent suppression, for example, of Reconstruction after the Civil War. I mean, look at backlash after the Civil Rights Movement, right? We actually opened the book with A Tale of the Southern Strategy, which was a conscious, use of racial appeals by Republicans, by advisors to the Nixon campaign, to divide and conquer people and play up people's resentments so that the plutocrats could win. And so, the backlash is there, and we also do have to cast a critical glance at our side and be like, what could we be doing better? How could we be smarter? How could we, again, really prioritize bringing more people into our movement and have a long view, because we're not going to win in one election cycle. And we are working with an electoral system that is really tough. It's a winner take all two-party system. And, that's the terrain that we're fighting on. And it's one that, allows for massive injections of dark money. And so this is the terrain we're on. It's not fun. But we're only going to move the needle, I think, if we are, really, if we stay on mission, if we're really dogged. And I think we have to be alert to these divide and conquer tactics, and right now, I think there are both, there's the far right, attacking woke, right, and trying to turn woke into a slur and sort of put the, put liberals and the left on the back foot, and to appeal to people's grievances and resentments and talk in this faux populist way. So we have to be aware of that. But as you said, I think there are also a lot of, liberals who are also seizing on this moment to attack the left. And ultimately, they're, assisting an authoritarian project by doing so, right? I mean, when Hillary Clinton comes out and, endorses George Latimer against Jamal Bowman, this moment, it's like you're enabling authoritarianism. So we've got to fight on a lot of fronts. It's a tough time, but I do think the left is in a better place than 20 years ago. It's not where we want to be,
right.
But, I was there too in the post 9/11 era. And I think there's more class consciousness. I think we have a bigger strategic toolkit, but let's not lose sight of the bigger goal, which is to build big, inclusive, powerful movements, and it takes work. And really, this is why the message of the book is organize, 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 build solidarity. It is the only thing that can save us, because we're not going to be able to outspend these guys. We're definitely not going to outgun them.
I think we could spend an hour on trying to assess Hillary Clinton's endorsement of Latimer, of a guy who has already come out and said, I'm not even going to support Joe Biden's returning, raising taxes on millionaires. I mean, it's pretty stunning, the lengths that they'll go to just to prevent one progressive voice in Congress in that instance. But that will have to wait for another day. The book is Solidarity, the Past, Present, and Future. And we will put a link to that at of a world-changing idea. We'll put a link to that in our YouTube and podcast descriptions and at majority.fm. Astra Taylor, Leah Hunt-Hendrix, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Good to see you all.
All right, folks. That does it for this portion of the program. We will head into the so-called fun half, wherein we will have some fun, apparently. That is the plan anyways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll be having some fun.
Okay.
And see you out the trail.
Out on the trail. That's a real thing. It's really upsetting that Vivek is not on the short list for the VP. Why couldn't they put him on? I mean, God bless you.
Excuse me.
I mean, honestly, they could have put him on there. There's not like they're doing real vetting of other people. He's going to pick J.D. Vance or maybe Berger, and they're not going to. They could just say he's on the short list. But you know what? I didn't like how ass-kissy Vivek was.
I actually got a billionaire to kiss my ass, Doug Bergman. He looks the part a little bit
Right.
more. Let's just say that.
Well, I mean, let's be real. He's putting certain people on there to signal to constituencies. Like Marco Rubio's not being seriously considered, but he wanted a Latino guy on the list of people that he's considering. And Vivek, he's like, the Indian people. I don't need him. That's how they think about these VP picks.
Did they
100%.
put what's her face, Tulsi Gabbard? Did she make the list?
She did not.
Not for the
official
vetting
list.
No. That was the only woman, if I'm not mistaken, was Stefanik, who made the request of documents.
It's too bad the dog killer had to go and brag about it.
Sad.
Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only help this show survive, you help it thrive. And also, by being a sustaining member, you get the fun half. The free half free of commercials. Then you get the fun half. And who knows what other magnificent benefits we give? I can't remember.
Who knows?
You probably should.
Sign up and find out.
I'm probably the first one to know, but somebody knows. Emma. Oh, wait a second. Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate, Majority Report blend. Soon we're going to have the new Majority Report blend logo catching up. We've had the old logo on about 6 years after we had switched logos because I didn't realize that we could email and say, hey, can you change the logo? So Julie did that, and we'll see. They'll start rolling those babies out soon. JustCoffee.coop. Emma, I hope you're not talking about basketball until after tonight.
We shall. I mean, look, I think tonight's the night, though. I think it's gonna be fine, Sam. The Celtics are up 3-1, as are the Florida Panthers, but both of the losing teams so far avoided a clean sweep on over the weekend, so they forced Game 5, the Oilers and Mavericks. We'll also talk about Rory McIlroy having one of the most historic choke jobs I've seen in professional sports with his putts. I'm not even a huge golf person, but this was a big story over the weekend. And we'll talk WNBA too, youtube.com/ESPN show.
Let's also be clear that probably the Celtics did that on purpose as a way of winning.
So
in the Garden, they've put that 18th banner up, and I want to applaud them. It was a little bit too obvious.
A little bit. So
start sweating a little bit if they lose tonight. Then
yeah, that's true.
I don't even like the look on your face. I don't even think I've ever seen a look like that on your face.
Well, I hope it goes 7. That's all. I don't want basketball to end. I'll miss it.
So yeah, check it out today, youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt.
Left Reckoning, Thomas Kennedy talked about Ron DeSantis deciding to not include drainage in the recent Florida budget at a time where they've had 4 straight days of massive rains and severe flooding. And also Joe Biden's amnesty betrayal and how that, is playing out. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, to hear us talk about that.
We'll be back in just a moment in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second. Now let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7-8?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single freaking day. What's on your mind?
Sports. We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm gonna go throw up.
Who libertarians? They're so stupid though. Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him.
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge Matt.
I'm positively quivering. I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-35 501 1/2 3/8
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
Call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just the week being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a gulag?
Outrageous.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye-bye. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, is the fun half.
Yes.
We will may turn on the phone soon. Do our best. Took a lot of phone calls on Friday. Did we?
Yeah, we did.
Any
Had
fun
some
ones?
good ones too.
We had some good ones.
Good ones, not
I don't
fun ones.
remember.
Was the Latimer one on Friday? About the guy who
Oh yeah.
I didn't hear this. What happened?
made some news.
Well, George Latimer apparently, I think it's well known in the district, has a girlfriend. Despite the fact that he's married. I mean, who knows what the
Lucky
situation
ladies.
is? He doesn't seem to be terribly concerned about it. There was a lot of reporting. I mean, there was a lot of reporting about his gal pal.
God, the more we hear about this guy, I mean, just stand up guy.
Well,
Being
who knows?
sarcastic.
Who knows what the relationship is? But we had a caller in who was the nephew of the gal pal, and he said he met him at Christmas, and it was a long time ago, and the guy was pretty odious. But then when we Googled that, we found out that he gave her a county job after she retired as a judge for like 150 grand, which, I mean, look, it's not impossible that your girlfriend, particularly if she was a judge, has, abilities that the county might want, but you would think it would be a bigger story than it was. And then it turns out
he's a good boyfriend.
There's a lot of patronage. Yeah. Why wouldn't he promote that?
Hey,
Not getting enough credit over here.
Do we still have that Bowman ad? Did we play that? We didn't play that Bowman ad from Friday on the show. But here is, in the meantime, here is from their last debate last Wednesday. Moderators asked Bowman and Latimer whether there are any circumstances where the U.S. should cut off military aid. And it'll be an interesting question to see, how this is answered, considering that Latimer has received somewhere around like $14 million in outside expenditure money, and the vast majority of that coming from AIPAC affiliated super PACs. To be fair, $2 million came from a cryptocurrency group called Fair Shake. And it turns out there's crypto, but they also think that there should be no discussion as to whether we would condition aid to Israel in the midst of them committing a genocide upon the Palestinian people. But here is Latimer and Bowman.
With the first topic, which is the war between Israel and Hamas. The Middle East is 5,000 miles away from the district, but the war between Israel and Hamas has been one of the hottest
Pause it
issues
for 1
in this
second.
race.
This idea, like it's 5,000, like what? Let me just imagine, let's say the question was about Chinese tariffs. What do we say? Like China's so far away, but do we really need tariffs?
Yeah, it's like it's 1839 or something.
Exactly. Like,
yeah.
Congress is in charge of voting to allow expenditures for foreign policy, foreign aid, weapons sales. What is the difference in how far away it is.
Yeah, the weapons are going.
Well, so, I mean, if you're upset about like that notion, then take it up with the people that are pumping millions and millions of dollars into this race to preserve a structure or a system that is that many miles away, right? I mean, it's being put at the forefront of this race because of all the dark money that's being poured in to preserve our interests in that particular region. And then there's, of course, the added frustration of at least some of these outlets are calling it the war on Gaza now. I can't deal with the Israel-Hamas war thing anymore. It does so much work to cover up what Israel is doing here, but continue.
Between Israel and Hamas. The Middle East is 5,000 miles away from the district, but the war between Israel and Hamas is one of the hottest issues in this race, as you both know. And we want to start the debate by asking you to tackle a few questions about this conflict. And we're going to start with Mr. Bowman.
Pause it for 1 second. I mean, like, why isn't, put the context of why it's such a big deal. It's because AIPAC affiliated PACs are spending $14 million in a primary.
So many ads.
I mean, it's extraordinary. We've never seen anything like this. And it's not like this is obscure news. Everyone knows it, but apparently it can't be said on Spectrum News. We have a spectrum, but we're not that far. The spectrum isn't
the
that,
narrow spectrum.
It's not that broad. Go ahead.
A few questions about this conflict, and we're going to start with Mr. Bowman. This is a question for both of you, however. One of the most important powers you have in the House of Representatives is the power of the purse. Are there any circumstances in this war in which the United States should cut off giving weapons or aid to Israel? For example, do you support funding Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system? Mr. Bowman.
We should not be sending any more weapons at this time to Israel. They are engaged in collective punishment by killing mostly women, children, and babies in Gaza. We need a permanent ceasefire down. We need a release of all of the hostages, and we need the humanitarian aid to get into Gaza as quickly as